The skyrocketing petrol prices are making petrol cars less and less desirable with each passing day. EVs are obviously the future, that is where we are headed to, but even that isn't completely ready yet thanks to the weak charging infrastructure. What makes a very strong case though are strong hybrids, and that is what Honda has focused on with their latest car. This is the City eHEV, and it is the latest strong hybrid in the country.
Now at first glance, it is a City from every angle, but there are some changes that make it different from the standard car. The City eHEV is based on the top spec ZX trim of the City, so you get a pretty packed car. At the front, it gets a sportier treatment for the bumper and a claw-like design for the fog lamp housing. Over to the side, the wheels, while the same size at 16 inches, are finished in dual tone. There is no branding or badging on the fenders about it being a hybrid. At the rear, it has a sporty design with a spoiler, a black diffuser with carbon accents, and an eHEV badge as well. What's also very interesting is that both the Honda badges at the front and at the back have a slight blue tinge in them, signifying that this is a strong hybrid.
Now inside the City eHEV, not a lot is different. You've seen this layout before on the standard car. The touchscreen still 8 inches, switchgear is still very much the same. What is new though is this two-tone upholstery. It is ivory and black, and it does look really nice. The seats also have a nice amount of leather on them, and of course they are in this ivory shade, which will be a bit difficult to maintain, but it definitely looks premium and plush. You have a sunroof, one touch sunroof, so all those things are here. But now you have an electronic parking brake, and what that has done is free up some space here, which means you now get a little bit of storage here, but you still don't get wireless charging. That is in the options or the accessory list, if you may, but no wireless CarPlay, no wireless Android Auto. So those are things that are a miss, and no cooled seats either, and that is just such a disappointment because I mean it is going to be a premium car, it is going to be priced at a premium from the standard car. Those things could have been there, they should have been there actually. Well, the other big changes are the steering wheel. It is more or less the same, but you now have these switches for the ADAS functions, and the big one is in the instrument cluster. You have a 7-inch TFT display, which is nice and vibrant, lot of information, and on the right you have the same speedometer, very clean and clear. But more on the TFT display, it is basically your EV meter. You know, that is what tells you your battery, the energy flow, the range you have, the performance you're getting, and a lot of it is concentrated in that digital meter. Of course, you don't have an RPM gauge, so it's very much like driving an EV, but more or less it does have that techie. It has a lot of information in it, and it is very, very convenient and easy to use as well. Space in the back is not too different. Dimensionally, there has been no change, so you still get the good amount of leg room, still get the headroom, but you also have a vent in the back, and that is there to cool the battery pack that is behind the seats. What it does is basically transfer the cool air from the AC and from the cabin, and it goes straight onto the battery and helps it cool.
It doesn't get in your way if you're seated there, and as on other cities, seat cushioning and comfort is really special.
What is a bit of a downer is the boot space. Now it has gone down 200 liters, and that's a lot. Of course, you have the big battery to blame for it, but 200 liters. Now the boot space is at 306 from 506, which means you can fit maybe 2 suitcases, and it does have a bit of an underfloor storage where you can have maybe a soft bag or a duffel bag or something like that. But overall, it has gone down, so the practicality has taken a slight hit. However, with an hybrid, the main thing is what's under the skin, the engine, the motor, and the battery, and how it works together. So let's find that out. Now the City eHEV is powered by a 1.5 litre iVTEC engine, but it is not the same engine that is on the standard car. You see, it has some big significant changes, and the biggest one is that it runs the more efficient Atkinson cycle. Now, Atkinson cycle is widely used with hybrids because they are low in power, high in efficiency, but because the hybrid has an electric motor, it compensates for that loss in power. So the performance is not hampered that bad.
The City eHEV is a strong hybrid, and what that means is that there is an engine, two motors, one for powering the wheels and the other to charge the battery, and a battery pack that sends power to the wheels.
Now the engine, as I said, is 98 horsepower. The traction motor gives it another 109 horsepower, and combined they both make 126 horsepower.
Now you know the theory and numbers, here's what it's like to drive.
Now the other great thing about this eHEV is that when you're at a stoplight like this, the AC keeps on going. It doesn't really shut off, the compressor doesn't shut off, you still have it all running even though the engine is shut, and that's a really nice thing. And as you get going, it starts off in EV mode because the battery always has a bit of charge to it. It never really depletes completely. So while taking off, you are in EV mode as I am right now, and if I want a little bit of a push, then the motor kicks in, you now are in hybrid mode. And when I really push it, like I said, go up to triple digit speeds, that is when the engine kicks in. The thing is, you don't have a manual EV mode. The motor decides when the battery has sufficient charge, it will switch to just EV. If not, it will add the motor, and if not, it will add the engine as well. Now when you're out on highways and long stretches, you want that extra bit of performance, you want a bit of grunt, and that is where the engine mode kicks in. You see, what it does is basically negate the motor and the battery and sends power directly to the wheels. Because to be honest, it doesn't really make sense for the engine to send power to the generator, that will send power to the motor, and then that will power the wheels. And that is done by using an engine linked clutch. Now the clutch only activates after you are past 80 to 100 kph, because that is when the engine really needs to come in and power the wheels directly, and that is how it is also a lot more efficient.
It sounds complex, but it works seamlessly. In hybrid mode, the engine powers the generational motor, which powers the battery, and the battery then powers the traction motor that sends power to the wheels. Only once you go above the triple digit speeds, the engine directly powers the front wheels, and if it needs more, the motor also assists it as well.
As a result, you have a 0 to 100 time of just 10 seconds, making this the fastest city there has ever been.
And speaking of transferring power, the City eHEV also has an eCVT.
Now it's not like a standard CVT where you have a belt and pulley mechanism, so the rubber band effect is not there. You push your foot down and the engine lunges ahead, you get a bit of a drone, and what is really interesting about this eCVT is that it also has these gradual steps. So the engine RPM is actually modulated, and that sort of mimics a gear shift, or a setup. It still has just one gear, so just one gear ratio throughout, but through software and through controllers on the engine and the motor, Honda has sort of mimicked the whole idea of a gear shift. So if I push my foot down now, it will go ahead and shift, I hope you've heard that. But that's the whole idea. The idea is to make it feel like a normal car, like you're not driving an appliance of some sort. It is a more feel-based thing. It doesn't have any rewards in terms of efficiency or performance. It is just there to make it feel like a normal, usual car.
What is also an important aspect on a strong hybrid is regenerative braking.
The City eHEV also has strong recuperation or regenerative braking. That means you have 3 levels, D1, D2 and D3, and those are quite significant because in D1 you do feel a bit of that resistance, in D2 it gets a bit stronger, and in D3 it is the strongest. 3 being the strongest, for the city, for bumper to bumper traffic, you need as much regen as you can get because you're going to be braking a lot more. So that works, but there is also a B mode, which is the engine braking mode, and that is used primarily for going downhill. When you're on a long downhill stretch, you want the B mode, and what that does is a bit of a permanent fix, because if you're in D3 and you continue downhill, and if you for instance accelerate, it will again shift to D2 or D1. You won't have it constant, then you have to move again to D3, and that is a bit of an inconvenience. If you just want to have constant regenerative braking, slot it in B and leave it there. It will not move until you shift it out from B. So that is a big plus, especially if you are on a downhill stretch.
The City eHEV also has a rear disc brake, and braking on the whole has been worked on very well.
Now what's very impressive on the City eHEV is the braking, and by that I mean the brake feel. You see, on hybrids, usually what happens is because of the regenerative braking, the brake feel is a bit artificial. Initially you feel a bit wooden, it is not hydraulic or fluid in any sense, but on this, Honda has made sure that it doesn't feel that way. They have these brake simulators behind the pedal, and that work really well, because what they do is send a signal to the electronic sensor, and that decides how much brake pressure and brake force is needed. So even though you're pressing a brake normally, it feels like it is fluid and it feels very, very hydraulic. So that brake feel is very important. And it's really great how Honda has sort of, made all these changes just so that the car feels car-like to drive. And you don't feel like you're driving, like I said, an appliance, a tech or a gadget. Usually that's the case with EVs. The steering is too light, the brake feel is artificial, everything is sort of like a toy. In this though, they have made sure that the car and the emotions are there, be it the steps that we talked about with the CVT, be it the steering which has a good amount of heft, and the brake which is again very, very feelsome.
The other weapon in the City eHEV's armory is the ADAS.
Now in terms of features, you of course have the standard stuff like I mentioned, but the big one of course is the ADAS. Now those are some really cool features, and Honda has done it without the use of radar or LiDAR. It is just a camera that scans ahead and projects the image back for processing. Then it detects if it is a pedestrian, if it is a bicycle, if it is oncoming traffic, if it is a car that's trying to turn in, and if it is the car in front of you.
However, while the detection is done well, since the camera and image processing isn't as strong as a radar sensor, there is some delay in response, and overall it isn't as smooth as a radar-based system. Sure, it will detect the obstacles very well, but you cannot and should not rely completely on it. There is also lane keep assist, which on a well-marked road will make sure the car stays within the lanes, collision mitigation, which automatically brakes once it detects an obstacle, and road departure mitigation, which scans the boundaries of the road even if it's poorly marked and offers corrective input as well. And then there's also the headlight beam auto adjust, which switches to low beam if it detects oncoming traffic or a car driving in front of you. Once the road is clear, it switches back to high beam.
Now ADAS and all these fancy features are well and good, but again, what's very impressive on the eHEV, and that's there on the standard car as well, is the lane assist camera.
The camera positioned on the outside rearview mirror projects the recording onto the screen and is a huge plus in terms of safety. The City eHEV is by far the most tech-laden city there has ever been, and you can go on and on about the wizardry that happens beneath. But simply put, it all works perfectly. In the city with moderate acceleration, it is safe to assume figures of around 18 to 19 kpl. Yes, it will be priced at a premium over the standard car, but for the extra you pay, you will end up saving a good chunk in fuel costs. For those who don't mind shelling out the extra and want a car with some strong tech, the City eHEV is the right choice. With no direct competition as of now, it has carved out a niche segment for itself.